Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm finally going to review Senex by Current Value. I just can't believe that this is happening, wow, what a way to end this decade. This is the best way to end this decade possible. This is why I still haven't uploaded my list with my top albums or my worst albums of 2019. It's because of albums like this coming just at the end of the year, and I pretty much had the list sorted out. I knew in which place every album would be, but now Current Value just releases his second release from this year, and I'm just in shock of how Current Value still manages, after all of these years, to progress as an artist and just keep pushing the boundaries of drum and bass music. Current Value, aka Tim Elliott, is, for me at least, my favorite drum and bass producer of all time. From back when he started in 1997, he would just push drum and bass to its limits and just go into lots of different sounds. Now, his more recent works, especially on this decade, are not close to the ones he would do like back in 2006 or 2007, where the sounds would be extremely aggressive, really heavy, super dynamic, and it would go to some really disturbing, nightmarish, militaristic stuff, just horror-inducing drum and bass with a huge aggression to its sound. Now in recent years he has gone more into the neurofunk side of things, and even in that genre, Current Value shows why he's the best in pretty much anything he touches. The very first more apparent neurofunk directions appeared in his album in 2013, Stay on This Planet. Easily one of my favorite works of Current Value, one of the more catchier ones, especially for its time, and in its productions and sound-wise it was an incredible experience. After this point, in my opinion, the best and more direct sound of neurofunk was with the release of the perfect EP, Nitro. I pretty much love everything this EP had to offer, and it was at this point where I truly wanted to see how he would progress with his sound. Now, after this point, his sound would just get more aggressive, to the sense that some of the scenes and some of the melodies would just be extremely noisy and more to the industrial side of things and far more mechanical. A really futuristic sound that shows Current Value in some of his catchier moments and also in some of his best when it comes to production. This brand new album is his debut on METHLAB recordings. He has released some other stuff, some other EPs in the past, like the Partition EP, which is one of my favorite works he has done in this decade, and then he released a quite decent EP, Consequences. But this album is something that I was quite anticipating, since this album is actually really massive, and pretty much everything I've heard from the teasers of this album just got me really excited and really hyped about what is this album going to offer. This album is 21 tracks. This is easily the longest and the most ambitious work from Current Value. I highly doubt he has done anything more ambitious than that. And not only that, but this album is released about 1 or 2 months after the release of his previous work, Pure, which showed possibly the most versatile work from Current Value. He tried to go a bit into some of his more old school stuff when it comes to some of the beats, but also incorporating it with lots of elements of his recent output as neurofunk stuff. But he also used a lot of features in his album, including MC Copa and also having an ambient track. Not all of the elements and all of the variations worked in his favor, in my opinion, but the album was still pretty good. And so after listening to some of the tracks teasing towards this brand new release, Senex, on SoundCloud, I just got really hyped. And the thing is that this is the biggest tease I've gotten with an album like ever. The thing with this album is that more and more songs would just be out on SoundCloud, and We were at this point where more than half of the album was actually out, and we got to this point where it is the initial release of the album where he just says that it's available to download the digital versions on Bandcamp and listen to almost all of the tracks on SoundCloud. The actual initial release on platforms like Spotify will be out on January 10th, and I was like, this can't be happening. But I just couldn't wait. Pretty much all of the album is just released at this point. I just don't get this way of teasing. This is something that I haven't ever experienced before. But I can say it was definitely worth it because I was just at the edge of my seat, just wanting more and more. And even upon listening to the LP mix, there were so many tracks that I was just anticipating to listen to the full version, and in pretty much all of the occasions I was extremely satisfied. And the thing with this album is that it actually showed that Current Value would go into a more straightforward direction, a sound that wouldn't have the variations of like Pure, for example, and so that would just make me worried that the album might just get a bit repetitive. But no, Current Value manages in a very long album, a very lengthy one, to just offer incredible material from start to finish. Senex is without a doubt his magnum opus in his Neurofunk phase. This album pretty much took all of the elements that Current Value was building upon all of these years, just to create this perfect combination of just so many different, incredibly done sounds with easily his best production out of every Neurofunk thing he has done up until this point, and also combining it with some quite old school stuff, especially with tracks like Dismantle and Unrest, where the drums would just have such an old school feel of Current Value, and they're just done so well with this very noisy and this heavily aggressive bass and synth sounds. I could just go on and on and on about why this album is so amazing, but I think that especially if you are a drum and bass fan, you have to listen to this album. Do not throw this out of the window just because it's a long album. It's definitely worth it for every single moment over here, and it's something that I rarely say. For an album that is so long and so lengthy, I'm just so impressed with the finished result. This is the best way to end this decade. I'm super excited and so happy about this album, and I can comfortably say that even in that short period of time, yes, I can comfortably say that this is album of the year material. I was so hyped for this album, and I'm just so glad that it all came down to just an impressive release from start to finish. You could say that it's such a short period of time to just get this as album of the year, but honestly, I've heard to so many of these tracks for so many times. I just remember lots of the melodies by heart. This album just makes me want to dance furiously. It's a heavy, punching experience. It's not like the most technical shit you're ever going to hear. It's not like an IDM album or a weird breakcore or speedcore mix of sounds. Instead, this is a quite catchy and really simplistic album for its most part, but it's the sounds he uses and this whole industrial and futuristic approach that just manages to blow my mind. And I'm pretty sure that even if I sit down and see lots of the tutorials Current Value has done, where he shows how he makes a track or how he makes a beat or a bass sound, I'm just pretty sure that I would still cannot get into his head and just manage to understand his unlimited amount of imagination in just some really simple patterns. A biggest example of this is possibly my biggest highlight of this album, which is hard to find a specific highlight because there are so many tracks I just love, but if there's one track that manages to stand out a little bit more, that is E-Machine. When I first heard of this track, I was just so blown away by the sounds, by these instant transitions into so many different layers of noisy synths. The beat is insane. Everything about this track is so absolutely insane, and we're talking about such a simple idea where you're just like, how did I not think of this? How did anyone else think of this? But Current Value just manages into such a simple melody to just capture so many different sounds and just make them get fused so well together. The blend of sounds is absolutely incredible. Getting into some other tracks, I was worried that I wouldn't be the hugest fan of the track Incite, the introduction of the album. And for a first listen, those were my initial thoughts. I thought that this track was a bit unnecessary, since the rest of the album is just banger after banger after banger. An introduction was not necessary. But listening to it more and more, I just admire the sounds on this thing. It's just the perfect way to just get you prepared for anything else that is going to come up with the sounds on this thing. Those industrial mechanical soundscapes with those two sounds just coming in and out into lots of different time periods, and this monotonous background ambience make for a track that the more I listen to it, the more nightmarish it becomes, and I absolutely love it. This is a perfect way to start the album. And the thing is that the album doesn't even pick up after this point with one of the catchier moments. The second track is Embedded, which is one of the more atmospheric moments out of this entire album. It has a very wobble bass and a really simplistic beat, but the incredible thing is this dark atmosphere surrounding this entire track and how it just progresses and it just gets better and better until the end of the song. And definitely a great thing about this album is actually the intros. The introductions into pretty much all of the songs are actually on point just before the drop. The thing with some of the later Current Value releases is that I was actually not that much impressed with some of the intros, which is something that, especially with some of the more old school stuff from Current Value from back like 2008 and 2009, I would just be really impressed by what the intros would build up to. And I think that with some of the later works, the intros kind of lost their impact, but fortunately this is not the case whatsoever with this album. The intros are absolutely mesmerizing, and it's really great that in lots of those intros he has this really beautiful and atmospheric piano melodies, which is in a lot of the tracks actually. Like, take the beautiful melodies of tracks like Afterthought, Hypnosys, Entity, Friendly Takeover, Mars, and just many more. All of those tracks have such beautiful intros that come into great contrast with what the drops just bring to the table, but still the most aggressive part comes with some of the really noisy industrial soundscapes with some of the bass or some of those really weird synths, which is a huge case with some tracks like Friendly Takeover and Hit the Wall. God, these tracks, every time I listen to them, they're just mind-blowing. I just love what he has done with the sounds of these tracks. Then you have lots of the moments that actually feel like a throwback to some of his stuff, like, for example, back in the day where he would just first experiment with neurofunk music with the album Stay on This Planet. Tracks like Key Pattern with those usual robotic female vocals remind me a lot of the track Down My Veins, especially in its introduction. Also with tracks like New Arrival and La La Land, which La La Land is one of the most atmospheric and one of the most beautiful moments in this entire album. Then you have moments like Megacity, which gives me a lot of Biocellulose vibes. Then you have some really unique moments and out there like Chain Walk. I don't think I've heard another track from Current Value that sounds like this, with this really weird beat progression and those really well crafted sounds that are put just on point. Then you also have tracks like Crystal Ball, which kind of reminds me some of the older stuff from Spore or State of Mind. This album, even though it's more straightforward, it manages to get into lots of phases of Current Value in his entire career. Also, I think that Current Value has shown a good improvement in the pacing and the structure in lots of those tracks, but I still wanted some of the tracks to be a bit longer or some of them to just be paced a bit differently, because there are moments that I would like for them to be a bit longer. I'm sorry, but 4 minutes long is not enough for a drum and bass song, and lots of the moments over here just go for 4 and 5 minutes. But fortunately, in lots of the occasions, they are really well structured, they're really well done. Some of the highlights when it comes to just really good pacing are tracks like Embedded and New Arrival, just because they're not as standard and as predictable as you would expect. On the other hand, there are tracks that I would love much more if they were structured differently. I'm talking about moments like In Depth and Unrest. Those two songs could easily be two of my favorites on the entire album had they not been done that way. But when it comes to the main thing, to the main punch, there could be far more to it, like far more. And the only track that I wasn't the hugest fan of was the track Off Grid. I like the structure to this thing, but I would love to see this sort of structure on the track In Depth, because Off Grid also sounds a lot like In Depth. They're even almost the same in length, but Off Grid just sounds a lot of like a weaker version of In Depth. It's similar to the beat, and Off Grid is one of those moments where even the intro doesn't add up that much, doesn't enhance the experience far more. But other than that, I pretty much love almost everything in this album. Incite, an amazing introduction. Embedded, such an incredible atmospheric and unique piece. E-Machine is banger of the year. Afterthought, Hypnosys, amazing tracks. Dismantle, love that old school certified Current Value snare. It punches so good. Entity, Friendly Takeover, Hit the Wall, just mind-numbingly insane industrial moments. Mars, just silly and out there. Chain Walk, unique. Frontier, incredible bass response on this track. New Arrival, great structure, great pacing, and the best rise up to a drop from all of the tracks over here. La La Land, just absolutely magnificent and beautiful. This is amazing. I'm just so mesmerized by this album, and I'm just so surprised how Current Value just keeps coming up with so many great ideas. He just progresses and he just gets better with each release. I'm just so amazed that after all of those years that I'm listening to Current Value, there are still so many works that he does that I absolutely love. This is one of the best things Current Value has ever put out. This is easily my favorite thing he has done in this decade. This album, even if it's his longest work, yeah, this is his magnum opus in his neurofunk phase. This video has gone for really long, but I think it deserves it. I think that this album is absolutely amazing, but I'm just going to leave it at that. There's not something else I have to say. This is a 9+ out of 10. A 9+ out of 10. This is an almost perfect album. If you don't like this album, you've probably never been that much into drum and bass anyways, and that's understandable. But for me, yeah, this is album of the year. I'm going to leave it at that. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye. I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done.